I'm Eric Lindquist. This is the MLB Strategy Show. I'm just going to get right to it here. I got Adam Scherer alongside with me. We've been doing a lot of shows here together. It's good to be back here. Adam, how was yesterday for you?
It was okay. Kind of frustrating. Cash lost on Javier Baez's ninth inning home run or eighth inning home run, whatever it was. Tournaments, kind of frustrating because I made a little bit of money, but I had a lot of Cleveland stacks and just didn't win the tournament, which is always disappointing. Always feels like a loss if you don't get first place out of 58,000 people. So, but it was fun. It wasn't, a bad slate. How'd it go for you?
Well, we talked a little bit before the show and last night where it's just like, for whatever reason, getting Fantasy Cruncher and you're making lineups on DraftKings, FanDuel, I think I'm going to try to stick to one site here when I'm doing a show on the front end of it because I ended up removing Cleveland out of my pool on accident. Loved Jose Ramirez and Franmil Reyes. I've been massively overweight to J-Ram pretty much every slate. Now with Franmil back, super cheap. That was by far my favorite two-man stack. We had some people hit us up on Twitter ahead of the show today. So glad everybody was able to profit off of it. I was not one of those people. So huge bummer to kind of start off with it for yesterday. Ended up being a little bit of a loss, but we've got 14 games to get to today. Does anything kind of pressing jump off the page to you as we're kind of refreshing ownership? I think there was one thing that might have jumped out to you early on here.
Yeah, Jacob deGrom's on the slate, and so as usual, he's going to get tons of ownership. But right now on DraftKings, we have him projected for 63%. That's something that maybe comes down during the day, maybe it doesn't. That seemed just high to me. Not even saying obviously I haven't built lineups yet. Maybe that's where I come in too. It jumped out as like an alarming number, but whenever it's a Jacob deGrom slate, obviously that's kind of like the number one pressing point is, are you going to roster deGrom or are you not? Because as usual, he is just head and shoulders better than every other pitcher.
That he definitely, if you want to roster the guy who's in the middle of the best pitching season in the history of baseball, sure. Yeah. Probably somebody you want to get to. But yeah, that's a gigantic number to be seeing. As we're getting going here, before we get into this slate, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when all of this and all the other content at Awesemo is going live. We are being presented today by PrizePicks. We will get to them a little bit later here in the show. A fantastic thing to be using alongside with our new MLB player props tool. I must say it is a great addition, but you ready to get into this slate, my dude?
Yeah.
All right, Toronto, Baltimore, starting on the top end. We got Steven Matz on one side for Toronto. I think it's Dean Kramer. I haven't seen anywhere other than just on the DraftKings side, he's listed as the probable pitcher here, but no line available here. I think it was minus 175. I saw on a couple books around the industry on Odd Shopper. So you can definitely take a look at that as well. But going to be a good hitting environment. There's really no question for Toronto here. In the event that it's Dean Kramer, not somebody that jumps out meaningfully to me whatsoever for the season. 7.25 ERA, 1.61 WHIP. Neither number looks that enticing. And Steven Matz on the other side, lefty with some upside here, but not really the side like a lefty going up against this Baltimore team is kind of a fine line to be walking.
Yeah, and Matz, I think, is decent. The Orioles have some dangerous bats. You have Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle, Santander as a switch hitter. It's a right-handed heavy lineup, probably all right-handed with the exception of Cedric Mullins. Matz has been okay against righties, 22% strikeout percentage this year, 174 ISO allowed. So there is a pretty decent chance that guys like Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle, one of those guys get to him. But at the same time, a $7,800 price tag on Matz isn't that isn't that high. There is some upside for him there. So I don't feel very strongly one way or the other, but I think that it's an okay spot. The biggest concern that I would have outside of, the right-handed power in the middle of the Orioles lineup is that we did have Matz spend basically 2 weeks on the injured list, came back last start, only threw 48 pitches, wasn't pitching particularly well, but still, just coming off that 48 pitch outing, I'm a little concerned that maybe you're only going to see, 70, 80 pitches, even if he is pitching well.
And on the other side, really nothing that we need to talk about from the Baltimore side. In the event that it is Kramer, he is not good at throwing baseballs like most of these Baltimore Orioles. I'm so sorry. Your team is terrible.
It'll be fun in a couple of years, hopefully. But yeah, it's pretty brutal right now. Dean Kramer, one of the pieces of the Machado trade, kind of turning into like the best piece of the Machado trade, which is just unbelievable. But not particularly interested in going to Dean Kramer here against a very potent Toronto lineup.
You need Sam Presti out there. You need to kind of move him and allocate all his talents to Baltimore.
Yeah, need somebody that can do better with one of the best players in baseball than Yasniel Diaz and a bunch of pitchers that can't pitch.
It's so unbelievable. I feel your pain. It's all right. I'm paying, my football team's paying Kirk Cousins an absolute truckload of money. My baseball team doesn't have anybody who can pitch, and my basketball team we don't even talk about. So, yay, Minnesota sports. What a good time to be alive. We're looking at bats. That's basically what we're going to be looking at in this spot. All the usual suspects from the Toronto side. They are very, very expensive. As we're getting things fired up here on the MLB DFS Top Stacks tool, Toronto, top stack percentage, 13.1%. I think that speaks to, it doesn't really matter who you're putting on the hill from Baltimore. They don't have anybody who's going to be missing these bats between Vlad, between Bichette, between all of these dudes with so much power up and down the lineup. Even on the backhand, we've been talking about Grichuk, Lourdes Gurriel. I mean, what are you going to be doing with Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, love getting to the bats here. Right now, their top stack percentage is much higher than their aggregate ownership as well. When you look at Dean Kramer, he's really struggled with power from both sides of the plate. Strikeout numbers are a lot better against lefties than righties. And so you're going to have all this right-handed power, putting the ball in play against a pitcher that only has a 16% strikeout percentage against righties. He's allowed a 277 ISO to right-handed hitters, 247 to lefties. Semien, Bichette, Guerrero, Springer, Hernandez. That is a lot of power from the right side. Grichuk, Gurriel, even Danny Jansen, if he's in the lineup batting ninth, has some pop as a cheap catcher. Kevin Biggio, probably the only lefty in the lineup. Plenty of upside from him as well. This is a team just 1 through 9. You can get to it pretty much however you want. Obviously, the guys at the top are the best, but they're also expensive. It's a team that is just going to be, I think, pretty easy to mix and match and just have a lot of different combinations.
And on FanDuel, I mean, it's the same thing too. The ownership's just kind of not meeting it there. This is a game we would have had every single team on the slate. The Tampa Bay got canceled. Tampa Bay and Cleveland, so that is no longer on the slate. But every other team in the entire league is in action tonight. Toronto looking like it's going to be a very, very prime spot early on to be targeting bats. But also Baltimore, I don't want to necessarily sleep on them. You said Steven Matz is somebody with not a ton of his pitch count. We kind of think that it's going to be pretty low in this spot. Definitely a lefty, the right-handedness you want to have going up against the guys like Trey Mancini, Ryan Mountcastle. Definitely some pop that exists in this lineup. Fantastic ballpark. Looks like it's going to be pretty decent hitting weather. Winds blowing out, 70% humidity, 85 degrees. I mean, Baltimore is a pretty good team to target today too, no?
Yeah, I agree, especially that like 3-man mini stack of Hayes, Mancini, Mountcastle. It seems like they get slept on a lot because Baltimore as a team is so bad, but all three of these guys can hit. Hayes probably a big piece of Baltimore's future if he can stay healthy. Mountcastle almost definitely a big piece of Baltimore's future, and then Mancini, a little bit older than those guys, but clearly a strong major league hitter. So those three, they're just, and I mean, Mullins obviously is great as well, but you have the lefty-lefty matchup there. So not quite as appealing for him, but the top 4 in that lineup really are not bad at all. Like they're good. So I think going to, even if you're not full stacking Baltimore, using Mancini, Hayes, Mountcastle as one-offs, 2-mans, 3-mans, whatever, I think you get a lot of upside there that maybe goes a little bit overlooked.
Favorite bat from that side? I mean, it's like Mancini, Mountcastle. If you were targeting one-offs here specifically, is there one that sticks out to you?
I mean, they're really close. I guess I would go Mancini, but
okay.
Don't really have a strong preference. Like Austin Hayes is very inexpensive, so he's probably the one that would be the easiest to get in. Mancini and Mountcastle, both first basemen, which is really frustrating. But yeah, and that's actually something that does kind of screw up those Baltimore stacks. But
it's awful. Yeah, why can't they make Mancini outfield eligible? Mountcastle actually has played some outfield. I think, didn't he go to the All-Star game as an outfielder now? Or
Mountcastle?
Yeah, I saw something where he was like nominated as an outfielder or something.
Oh, he may have been. He's been playing some outfield. I mean, in DraftKings defense, maybe they've watched Mancini and Mountcastle play outfield and decided they're not outfielders, but they do. Mountcastle does get some time out there. So yeah, it's pretty egregious that they're not. One of them isn't an outfielder. It should be Mountcastle, but yeah. Either way, that's something that again, it's going to make it really tough to like 5-man Baltimore stacks because you can't have 2 of the guys you really want, and it mitigates what I was just saying about the 3-mans as well. But 2-mans, Hayes, Mountcastle, Hayes, Mancini, or just one-offs, I think you can't really go wrong with those guys. They look very good here.
Hey, Adam, if you want to be a homer today, you can go to that one site, FanDuel, and you can fire it up if you really want to. Is that something that intrigues you today?
I don't want to say disparaging things about FanDuel, but that's not enough to get me over there.
Okay. Just thought I would check. Atlanta at Pittsburgh, minus 177. Atlanta, Pittsburgh, 9 total runs here, 4.9 implied for Atlanta, 3.8 for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh completely, one guy specifically, Ben Gamel, just went complete hamsies, kind of blew up the slate, surprisingly enough. I don't know. He was somebody that snuck through the cracks for me and was actually pretty decent. Unfortunately, nothing else was decent about my tournament lineups. Ian Anderson on the bump here for the Braves, 40.2% hard hit percentage on the season, 24.8% K percentage is a pretty good number going up against these Pittsburgh Pirates. Chad Kuhl on the other side, really limiting hard contact. That's about all I can say nice about him, because then 17.3% K percentage, 13.9% walk percentage. Those are just brutal numbers, kind of walking a fine line to roster him today. What are you going to be doing with pitching?
I think Ian Anderson is a reasonable option at 8,600. Pretty solid strikeout upside for him. Comes into the game, striking out 25% of lefties, 24.5% of righties. So no real big splits there. 124 ISO to lefties, 115 to righties. Done a pretty good job limiting power. 3.9 implied run total for Pittsburgh. So I think if you are, especially in tournaments, if you're going more mid-range at pitcher, Anderson is someone you can go to that I think has a pretty reasonable ceiling at his price tag. On the other side, I think it's really difficult to get to Cool because, like you said, he's done an okay job at limiting power against him, but he's not striking guys out. He is walking a lot of guys. 3.5% strikeout minus walk percentage is just extremely bad. And we know that the Braves have a potent offense as well. 5.3 implied run total. Just not a whole lot to like about Chad Kuhl here, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything that would make me roster him. One of the things we were talking about yesterday was a 9-gamer. There were guys like Chase DeYoung who were 5,600 or whatever. And we don't necessarily have to be looking that direction on this slate. I think just because of the quantity of pitchers that exist on that bottom end, you're going to have somebody out of this grouping that's going to pop. I mean, nobody is really that meaningful outside of Jacob deGrom on the top end. You have Rodon, you have Nola. We'll continue to go through some of the pitching. There's some mid-tier guys. I think Dane Dunning, somebody that was sticking out a little bit for me earlier, but Ian Anderson, 8,600, just kind of a weird price point. I kind of put him with Luis Castillo today, where both of them could definitely have some kind of a tournament winning upside there in that mid 8K range. But maybe I like them a little bit more than Jose Barrios, who's just kind of popping up even a little bit more in our projections, but we will continue to go through all of those options. As far as bats go, it's the usual suspects from Atlanta. Acuna, 55.3% hard hit percentage. Freddie Freeman, 52.3. Neither of those are going to be surprising pieces that even against Chad Kuhl, who's limiting hard contact, I got to think that Atlanta's still in a pretty good spot with these top end guys.
Yeah, without a doubt. 7% chance of being the top stack, about 6.5% ownership. So ownership about where it should be. I think Atlanta looks like a pretty neutral stack. The ballpark's not great, but it's a pitcher that's going to put guys on base. You have hitters on Atlanta that can do a lot of damage, especially 1 through 5. So no issues with Brave stacks here.
All right, and Pittsburgh on the other side. Ben Gamel for all the money.
Yeah, of course.
Fudge. Okay, that guy. I really don't even know what to say. Brian Hayes, I like as a human being and a baseball player. So maybe roster him, throw him into the mix. Brian Reynolds, 526 expected slugging. By far the best on this baseball team. I think that if you're playing a one-off, maybe taking some shots on him there. But Ian Anderson is fine. Pittsburgh, not fine, really. I don't see anybody that you'd want to roster bats-wise. Who's your favorite bat from Pittsburgh?
Probably Brian Reynolds. I think looking at what Anderson's done this year, if you are going to take bats against him, you want to look to the lefties. He's only allowed a 124 ISO, but his expected ISO is about 50 points higher at 178. He's allowed a 257 WOBA, but his expected WOBA allowed to lefties is 321. So it does seem like he's gotten a little bit lucky against lefties so far. And as you said, Brian Reynolds has been good this year. 382 WOBA, 212 ISO against right-handed pitching, 385 expected WOBA, 251 expected ISO. So the expected numbers are very good as well. And he's only 4,400. So I think, if you are taking bats, lefties are the ones that stand out. Brian Reynolds is the best of the group.
As everybody's kind of getting in here today, we're getting going. I've got my coffee. Hopefully you've got your coffee. We're rocking out. Make sure that you're signing up. And if you're not a part of Awesemo Plus yet, get the tools and content for just $29.95 for the weekly pass. It is the best industry. It's the best deal in the industry is what I'm trying to say here. Player projections, ownership projections, premium Slack channel, the lineup builder, and much, much more. We have thrown out content all the time. And for new members right now, 25% off of your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum using the promo code MLB Strategy Show. One word, all caps, MLB Strategy Show for 25% off. And if you just want the MLB DFS package for the week, $15.95. We got some massive slates. Today's 14 games. Friday usually is right around 14 games. I mean, baseball is the hot ticket in town here now. The NBA Finals is definitely tonight. I think Adam and I are probably going to split $1 million there, so that's exciting. Don't even bother signing up for that. Just make sure you're getting into MLB DFS streets with us and stop guessing and start winning.
We just got news on Baltimore starter. It's going to be Spencer Watkins, who was just called up recently. I know literally nothing about him, so I'm pulling up his FanGraphs page now. I do know he's a young pitcher in the Orioles system, which means he's not any good.
Oh, awesome. And I don't think we can probably roster him on DraftKings then. So there's that. Yep. We can. Yep, he's right there. We got him.
He's a 29-year-old pitcher in Baltimore system, which definitely means he's not any good.
He's 4K, so that's an important guy. And his name is Spencer with an S in the middle of it.
Yeah,
so
I believe the first Spencer with an S ever to play in the majors. That actually is something that came across my timeline the other day.
You're not kidding.
Nope. So this year he spent a lot of time with Detroit. Another sign he's probably not very good. He couldn't crack the major leagues with the Tigers when they were bad, or still are bad, but couldn't crack the majors with the Tigers. 2019, he made 16 appearances at AAA, 14 starts, struck out 20.8% of hitters. At AAA for Baltimore this year in 6 starts, 7 total appearances, struck out about 20% of hitters, about an 8% walk percentage. Gives up power, it looks like. AAA in 2019, 2.58 home runs per 9. This year at Baltimore, 1.65 home runs per 9. Also, keep in mind, Baltimore's AAA team plays in an extremely favorable pitcher's park, so that's not particularly good. Still love Toronto here is the gist of this.
He has some heat, doesn't he? Am I looking at that correct? Nope. He's giving up some. Yeah, there we go. Okay. He has 8 pitches in the major leagues so far as a 29-year-old. That's not ideal.
91.6 average fastball velocity.
Yeah, there we go. Very, very slow. Cool. Good time. Spencer Watkins, best of luck this evening to you, sir. Milwaukee, 2.5 total runs, going up against the Mets, 4.1 on that side. Oh boy. Yeah. So it's definitely, there's some weather that exists, some slight weather that's there, 38% chance of rain, 82% humidity, 80 degrees. It's going to be a favorable hitting conditions, but that doesn't really matter. We're not looking for hitters from the Milwaukee side because Jacob deGrom, the ace that we had talked about here just a second ago, just jumping up meaningfully. Top 2 pitcher percentage, 41.6% on a 14-game slate. That's astounding. 63% ownership here at the moment. I don't know. That seems pretty darn high, but also I think it's very doable when you have so many pieces of value and value stacks that exist on this slate, where it might be easier to just be able to jam him in and figure it out from there. What are you looking at doing with Jacob deGrom today?
Like 63% is definitely starting to get to the point where it's just like, okay, there's definitely merit to just going another route, especially when you do look at this slate. And you mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of mid-range arms between like 7K and 8,500 that, of course, you're not going to feel nearly as confident in them as you would in someone like deGrom. But there's enough of them and enough talent in that range. There's going to be a few that have big games. But also, that being said, and this is kind of a Twitter argument I got in last time deGrom pitched, there's still merit to just putting 20 to 30 fantasy points in your lineup and moving on. You're still talking, if he's 63% owned, that's still 37% of the field that isn't taking the guy. So you're still just, in a lot of cases, just kind of knocking those people back a little bit. So it's kind of like there's competing thoughts, because you see people like, oh, well, at his price, he's just so unlikely to put up a slate winning score. And it's like, yeah, but the points from your pitcher, just, if you can get 25, 30 points, that's still really, really useful. And then there's plenty of stack options that can help you win it. I think that ownership on pitching, especially when you're talking about someone like deGrom that is so consistent and is so good, I'm just a little bit less concerned about the ownership there, because it's just one piece of it's 1 out of 10 spots, in your DraftKings lineup, for example. Whereas when we talk about stack ownership, I think it's really, really important, because you're talking about 5 guys out of your 10, like 50% of your lineup. So the overlap is really, really big. When you're just talking about that one single piece, it's more like other sports like basketball, where you still have 9 other spots to be different and to be unique. So I'm not quite as concerned about it. I'm certainly not going to make fun of anyone who doesn't play a 65% owned Jacob deGrom in large field tournaments, but I'm just still inclined to put Jacob deGrom in the vast majority of my lineups.
Is this like a Derrick Henry situation in MLB DFS?
How so?
Just in terms of somebody that their floor is just so elevated compared to everybody else that exists on the entire slate, because he's getting 25 touches. Like, Jacob deGrom coming into this matchup is getting like 7+ Ks. Like, it's almost a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I think that's a decent comparison. Like when you think about the slates where like Derrick Henry's clearly the number one play, he's also really expensive, and you get into the whole conversation about like, yeah, well, what if what if so and so has a big game for less? And it's like, yeah, but I know that I can just put Derrick Henry in and move on and do some different stuff with my lineup elsewhere. Yeah, I think it's a decent comparison where like you're definitely not making a bad play if he's actually 65 or so percent owned. I don't think you're making a bad play by saying, okay, screw it, I'm going to hope that this is a start where he throws 80 pitches for one reason or another, gets 22 fantasy points. I know there's going to be guys that score more than 22 fantasy points on this slate. I think that's a fine thought process, but I also think that when people talk about tournaments, it just tends to go, people tend to just completely ignore the floor because ceiling matters, but like floor also matters. If you're playing a bunch of lineups and you can just use Jacob deGrom as a way to like increase your floor across them and then still mix and match bats and play a bunch of low owned hitters, I still think that's a perfectly fine strategy as well. So I don't think either one is wrong. I personally lean towards taking deGrom normally, but I don't have any issues if people do say, yeah, 65%, I'll take my chances elsewhere.
I think I am too. And I think that I kind of go towards that thinking for two reasons, really. One, 11.5 is not enough of a price difference relative to the other studs between Rodon and Valdez. He should be another $1,000, $2,000. If you were going to just compare them and their average DraftKings points, 32.1 for deGrom on the season, Rodon 25.7, Valdez 22.1. And obviously we have to factor in matchup as well, but considering the matchup is probably better for deGrom than it is for those other two as well, it just becomes kind of an easy plug and play. And then the second part of it just comes down back to that football idea of it. It's just like we saw yesterday, Brandon Woodruff was in the winning lineup of a 50,000 person tournament in the $6 on DraftKings. Like the difference between some of those mid-range guys, there were 4 or 5 pitchers that outproduced him, but it lands you in the same range as everybody else, and you're going to win tournaments mostly with your bats. And so why not just basically elevate the floor of your lineups for the guy who can absolutely like break your slate, but he's very rarely going to like hurt you and keep you from winning.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think, it's pretty unlikely that he at 11.5, it's pretty unlikely Jacob deGrom puts up a score that like you have to have from a point per dollar standpoint. But like you're saying, the gaps in normally when you talk about pitching, assuming, when you talk about the guys towards the top that have, good games, you're normally talking about, like a few point difference, like even 22 to 32, you're talking 10 points. You're talking less than a home run. So just getting the guy that is very, very, very likely to be in that range, I think carries a lot of weight. And especially considering hitter pricing in general isn't very sharp, and you have 28 offenses to choose from. So there's going to be plenty of different ways to get bats into your lineup, even with deGrom. I still just lean towards having deGrom.
Well, we just put the strategy show here this morning. So that's just fantastic stuff. And then I'm not going to be rostering anybody from Milwaukee. I don't think you are either. So we can probably just skip on them. The Mets, I guess we got to talk about Brett Anderson, a guy that on the one side of it just gives up crazy hard contact, 50% hard hit percentage, 556 expected slugging. But outside of Pete Alonso, there's really nobody that I want to roster on this Mets team. I mean, Dominic Smith going up against the lefty. What are you going to be doing with the Mets?
Yeah, I mean, I do like Pete Alonso here against a lefty that pitches to contact. That just, to me, sets up as a spot where Pete Alonso should have a lot of success. 2% top stack percentage for the Mets, about 1% aggregate ownership. Pretty low probability play here. And the problem, the Mets are always kind of hard to go to against left-handed pitching, no matter who the pitcher is, just because the hitters that you want to go to, basically outside of Alonso, are left-handed. Nimmo, Smith, McNeil, Conforto, all left-handed. So it makes it kind of tough to feel good about that stack. Alonso is a one-off, I think makes a lot of sense to me, though.
Same here. Moving ourselves along. Actually, before I do, one other thing that I wanted to bring up because it was brought to my attention here before the show by Joey Corman, one of the guys who does a lot of great work for us here at Awesemo for some of the different deals. So he's kind of got his hands in a little bit of everything here for us. But tonight we have for the NBA Finals Game 1, the Awesemo NBA giveaway. You can win a year of Awesemo Plus tonight, which is a $1,000 value. Will Chris Paul or Devin Booker have the most points in tonight's Game 1 of the NBA Finals? All you have to do is go down below. I'm going to take Devin Booker on that side of it. We're just going to talk raw points. I know Chris Paul just went absolutely completely nuts in Game 6 there against the Clippers. I'll just take Devin Booker. But again, don't listen to me. Definitely just pick one of the two, and you have a chance to win that 1 year pass. Retweet, like, reply with your pick, and one random winner will be selected from the correct responses. So definitely take advantage of that offer. And even if you are a member here, that's definitely something that you want to be handling and taking care of yourself. Moving along, we've got so many games to get to. I'm getting a little overwhelmed. Let's see, Dodgers, Miami, 4 runs for the Dodgers, 3.5 here for Miami. Dodgers slight favorites in a bad ballpark here. We've got Tony Gonsolin, who's a real fantastic pitcher, but just hasn't really seen the pitch count get to a place where we can roster him. Pablo Lopez going up against this Dodgers team that it's just so hard to ever want to pick on, up against right-handed pitching here for the season. The Dodgers all the way down to at a 22.4% K percentage. That's 25th. That's the 6th best in baseball. What are you going to be doing here with pitching?
I have some interest in Lopez at 7,700. He's certainly one of the guys, if you are, especially if you're not allocating a lot of your total pitcher ownership to DeGrom, Lopez is probably one of the guys you should be rolling the dice on. It's a tough matchup against the Dodgers, no doubt about it. But this is a pitcher with a 24.5% K- walk percentage this year, which is extremely good. Comes into today's game with a 28% strikeout percentage, only a 3.2% walk percentage, only allowing 3/4 of a home run, only allowing 0.75 home runs per 9. That was a weird way to word that. 3.12 xFIP. Like he's a good pitcher in a pitcher's park. 4.3 implied run total for the Dodgers is relatively low for that team. So again, it's not a spot where you're going to have a lot of confidence in Lopez, but if your game plan is to target mid-range pitchers and try and land on the ones that happen to outscore DeGrom, Lopez is certainly one of the ones that has the upside to do that.
All right. We got Loco in the chat as well. Good morning to you, sir. Minnesota game is a legit PPD threat tonight. Good to know. I think the only other spot with weather is that DeGrom game. Everything else looks pretty decent here. So let's go to bats here. I mean, this is just kind of a write-off game for me entirely. I love the case you made there for Pablo Lopez. Tony Gonsolin just not getting enough pitches here on one side, but not somebody I'm going to be picking on with Miami bats. We're seeing that low 3.5 implied run total for them. The Dodgers, we got some lefties that we can definitely target up against Pablo, but what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be stacking up the Dodgers or anything, hoping that, this is a spot where they can just kind of they're a talented offense. Never a bad thing to be stacking up a talented offense.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Like 1% aggregate ownership going to the Dodgers. I don't think it's a particularly high probability spot, but we've talked about this a lot. When you have teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, I kind of don't care who they're facing when you talk about large field tournaments, because I'm not interested in kind of like if it's really likely that they're going to do well. I'm more interested in like how good is good when they go off. And for the Dodgers, it is really, really good because they just have so much power top to bottom in this lineup. So whenever they're going to be low owned, I don't really care that they're facing a very good pitcher in Pablo Lopez. I do still have some interest. I wouldn't expect them to be one of my highest owned stacks. I don't really think that's going to be necessary on this slate, but they are a team that, just gives you a lot of upside at low ownership.
Phillies and Cubs, we're moving across the board. 5.2 implied runs here for Philly. We've got 4.4 here for the Cubs. 85 degrees here. Winds blowing out again. Just another repeat of yesterday here. Up and down that lineup. The only big difference is that you've got you got one serviceable pitcher in Jake Arrieta, not even somebody that I'd remotely consider like a in play for me on any given slate. I would say specifically a 14 gamer. But then the Phillies on the other side, Aaron Nola on the mound in a scary hitting environment for today. I mean, he'd be normally the guy you want to be looking at with a 29.4% K percentage, only a 5.5% walk rate on the season. He'd normally be the guy I'd be turning to, but God, the hitting environment just kind of freaks me out a little bit as a pivot off DeGrom. What are you going to be doing with Nola today?
All right, so first of all, I wanted to say something about Lopez. I had the wrong FanGraphs page up. The season, he has a 25.8% strikeout percentage, 6% walk percentage, 9.7% K- walk percentage. So still very good pitcher, good strikeout stuff. I had the page up with since sticky stuff. He's been fine. But yes, so just back to the point, Lopez, high upside, risky spot. Just different numbers than I'd originally said. As far as Nola goes, 29.4% strikeout percentage for the season. He's someone that we actually have projected to be pretty under-owned. Second highest top two pitcher percentage on the slate at 20%, only 12.5% ownership percentage. Definitely someone that I think you can be looking to in tournaments. Kind of similar to Dylan Cease yesterday, who obviously didn't work out, but the same kind of thought process where you have a ton of ownership going to DeGrom for $1,500 more. You have about twice as much ownership going to Carlos Rodon at $300 more, and then Nola kind of just not getting a lot of ownership because you do have a game where the wind's blowing out in Wrigley. Not quite as strong as it was yesterday, but still favorable hitting conditions. I don't mind taking some shots on Nola in tournaments. Again, especially if you aren't going to DeGrom, I think Nola is one of the pieces you probably should be using instead because he does have that very good strikeout upside. He does have the ability to really mow this team down. But again, the Cubs aren't a bad offense. The hitting conditions favor, or the weather conditions favor hitting. So I understand why Nola's ownership is low, but if you are using the strategy where you're going away from the clear number one pitcher because of ownership, you probably should be taking on risks on other very talented pitchers like Aaron Nola.
There's such a chasm between the two of them too. That's the big issue is like, you're looking at Jacob deGrom's K rate and then you look at 29, like there's nothing you can possibly say 29.4% K percentage is elite, but just doesn't look elite next to DeGrom here. And you can get a little bit more for it in a better hitting environment, in a better matchup. But I digress. Phillies, looking on this side of it, going to be a very popular team once again here. I would say on the whole, their ownership was much, much lower than I expected it to be yesterday. I'm not sure if you feel the same way on DraftKings. Do you?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I think in our last ownership update, it came down a little bit. I know the Cubs did as well because I ended up getting to more of them than I was earlier in the day. But yeah, I was a little surprised how low they came in because they, projected so well from a median standpoint.
Yep, agreed. And then looking at the top stacks tool right now, 7% top stack potential over on FanDuel, 14.6% ownership share. That's going to be difficult for me to really want to be going that direction on a 28 gamer. Again, they're in a fantastic spot. They put up 13 runs yesterday in this same type of environment. Jake Arrieta, a comparable pitcher to Zach Davies. I wouldn't say that I would pick one or the other ever. They both kind of suck in my opinion, but there's that. Philadelphia on DraftKings, also the same kind of ownership disparity where it's 14.6% ownership, 8% top stack potential. How are you feeling about rostering these guys? I mean, is it just a same situation like yesterday? Play them in cash, maybe not in tournaments.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Like I ran some cash lineups before the show just to kind of get a feel of how things were looking, obviously very early in the day. And like all of the lineups that I'd be considering had like 3, 4, 5 Phillies in it. So I think it backs up the idea that they're going to be very popular, whether it's as full stacks or guys, just being used as one-offs for filler in lineups. So, again, it just goes back to they're very likely to have success here. Jake Arrieta is not very good anymore. Sub 20% strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate, 214 ISO to lefties, 232 to righties, and favorable hitting conditions. So the Phillies are likely to do well. It just comes down to, again, there's 27 other teams. So even though they're likely to do well, there's a pretty low chance that they are actually the best scoring team on the slate. And you're going to get a lot of ownership going there. So definitely pay attention to ownership as we get closer to lock. It maybe comes down a little bit, but they're a team that's going to be very, very useful in putting Jacob deGrom in people's lineups. So you're probably just going to get a lot of overlap with Jacob deGrom plus some combination of Phillies bats.
So I'm one of the teams that I'm going to be very curious to see where their ownership at is the Cubs. I know Aaron Nola is an elite pitcher. 2.5% top stack potential doesn't look great. But if you're going to talk out flat out game environment, this is as good as it gets. Wind blowing out in Wrigley. You have Aaron Nola on the one side. As good as he's been for the entire season, he still gives up a 412 expected slugging here, was the number that I saw here. If it pops back up, yeah, of course it went away. There it went. 6.6% barrel percentage is fantastic. I mean, it's not a pitcher you're generally looking to pick on whatsoever, but looking at this lineup, I mean, you're going to get Jock Peterson at the top end. Rizzo's just a fantastic hitter. Chris Bryant as well. I might take a shot or two on the Cubs just because of the game environment. Might you do the same?
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what we just talked about with the Dodgers. I have a ton of respect for Aaron Nola. I think he's really good, but the Cubs also just have a lot of power in this lineup, really top to bottom, guys that can do damage. If Nola's not perfect, if Nola's not at the top of his game today, the weather conditions are going to hurt him if the Cubs are able to put the ball in play and drive the ball. And they just have a lot of power, so they can do a lot of damage. Sub 1% aggregate ownership right now. Nola has had some issues with left-handed power this year too. 225 ISO allowed, 209 expected ISO, a 30% strikeout percentage against them. So he's still missing bats, but when they hit it, they are doing some damage. So I think looking to guys like Jock Peterson, Anthony Rizzo has some upside. And then again, if you're just taking the approach that the Cubs are really low owned, the weather is really good, Aaron Nola is not going to always have his best stuff, then you still can take shots on Contreras, Baez, Bryant, just because of how good those guys are.
And we are going to talk for a second here about our partner, PrizePicks, today. They are offering daily prop-based contests, and it is such a great interface to be playing on. It is so easy to be able to go in there, to be able to put your deposit in, to be able to put the props together, and you can jump in between sports. Unlike you can on other interfaces, other prop-based spots, you can play multiple sports, whether that's NBA, MLB, WNBA, NFL, and even esports. You can combine them all. So pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players on the board, and you can net up to 10x your entry fee. Just download the app in the App Store or in Google Play today and make your first deposit using promo code Awesemo to receive an instant match deposit bonus of up to $100 and entry into their free $1 million NBA Playoffs Challenge. $1 million, that's a big number. So for today's board, just take a look around. We've got the MLB Player Props tool over at Awesemo 2. It's a brand new offering that we have. They basically have all the strikeout props, all of the home run props listed next to each other here or there. I mean, it is unbelievably quick and efficient to be able to go in there. Aaron Nola, the over on 6.5. We just got done talking about him at length. That makes for a great segue into this. Definitely going to be a spot on the prop tool where I want to be looking at going over on those numbers, play the over, combine it with some of the other great plays over on PrizePicks, and win money today. Looking over at our next game, we've got Detroit 3.9 implied runs going to Texas here. Looks like, is the roof going to be open, closed? I don't really know here at 8:37 a.m. on the West Coast. More than likely closed. That's kind of been what it has been here of late. But Jose Urena is such garbage at pitching baseballs. But Dane Dunning is going to be a guy that I have a ton of interest. As weird as that might sound, this Detroit team has been much, much improved. 13-7 in their last 20 games. Starting to come alive with the bats. They've got guys in the lineup who can definitely inflict some damage, but Dayton Dunning as well, 24.3% K percentage. He's at a price point I feel like you're going to land on quite a bit. Just at 7.4K gives you a little bit of savings on DraftKings. Not for me over on FanDuel where you're only rostering one pitcher, but DraftKings, are you going to have some interest going his direction?
Yeah, without a doubt. You and I had talked about it the last time he pitched. I think he was like 5,700 in a tough matchup. Now he's 7,400 in a better one, but he's just not really getting the respect I think he deserves as far as pricing goes here. 7,400 against the Tigers, I think is a very, very fair price point. He comes into today's start with a 24.3% strikeout percentage this year, 0.73 home runs per 9, walking 8% of hitters, 3.6 xFIP. This is just a pretty solid pitcher. And he's someone that, had prospect status coming up as well. He was at one point a White Sox prospect. I believe he was involved in the Reynaldo Lopez trade for Adam Eaton with the Nats. So the Giolito trade. So, he's someone that he was expected to be good. He has been good. The Tigers have played well of late, but still not an offense that I am particularly scared of. And, again, the salary is just pretty favorable. So I do like Dane Dunning as an SP2 here.
Good. That's all that matters to me. Going across the board to Detroit on that one side, as much as I like Dane Dunning, there's enough guys between Akil Baddoo, Jonathan Scope, Robbie Grossman. This might be just kind of a full stack for me. Just kind of piece it together in the event that Dane Dunning is not on, but definitely the interest lies in Dane Dunning for me on this side. But any Detroit interest in bats?
Not unless Dunning starts to get a lot of ownership. It is a spot where Detroit's cheap, so if Dunning starts to get a lot of ownership in larger field tournaments, I could see saying okay, Detroit's a team that's going to let me go, DeGrom plus some other good SP2, whoever you prefer, and get some cheap bats and, potentially take out a popular pitcher. But right now we only have Dunning on DraftKings projected for 6.8% ownership. I do think that goes up because one thing I'll note, we haven't gotten to him yet, but we have Shohei Ohtani projected for 45% ownership on DraftKings. I think that comes down. I think that's a glitch somewhere in our early ownership. So I think that comes down, and when it does, it's going to drive up ownership on guys like Dane Dunning. So if that happens, I could see maybe getting to some Detroit just as a cheap stack that lets you get two really good pitchers and leverage against a popular pitcher. But with the numbers we have right now, where the Tigers are one of the worst offenses on the slate, I think Dunning's a good pitcher, and he's not getting much ownership. I don't see a lot of reason to get into Detroit.
And Jose Urena, maybe my favorite guy to target in all of DFS year in, year out. He is just so reliable. 489 slugging, doesn't miss bats, 14.1% K percentage, walk rate at 10%, gives up just tons of hard hit contact, 48% hard hit percentage on the season. How many Rangers are too many Rangers?
Is Joey Gallo the best home run pick on the slate?
Yes. Yeah.
Jose Urena has struck out 8.6 7% of left-handed hitters this year. Joey Gallo is either going to walk or hit 4 home runs, like, or maybe like line out to the second baseman on the warning.
So I feel a little bit like a tool. I'm just going to throw this out there too. So I write the Slate Starter article every single night, every single morning. I put it together, and Joey Gallo, I think, has been my home run pick, like, I don't know, 6 of the last 12 slates that he's been on. And I think he's hit a homer just about every single one of them.
Nice. Yeah. By
now
the way,
he's in the best matchup he's had, period. So there's that.
Did you see the shift that the Tigers were using on him yesterday, by the way?
I didn't see. No, I didn't. I don't watch baseball.
Jonathan. No, but I watch Twitter. Jonathan Scope, I think it was at first base, and every other player was in right field. Like,
oh my God.
They had one player in the infield. But yeah, so I mean, the point here being, one of my favorite spots to target as far as looking for power upside is hitters that have a lot of power and strike out a lot and are facing a pitcher that does not miss bats. Jose Urena striking out less than 9% of lefties against a hitter in Gallo that either strikes out, walks, or homers. You're kind of taking the strikeout off the table here. Looks like a phenomenal spot for Joey Gallo individually, but then also, good spot for Nate Lowe, good spot for Adolis Garcia, who has power. Jonah Heim as a cheap catching option is fine. David Dahl, almost minimum salary from the left side. Very, very good spot for the Rangers.
Absolutely love him everywhere. Even David Dahl, 2.3K. He has been just complete garbaggio, but I don't really care. I think I might even include him. That's just how far I'm willing to go to roster every single person I possibly can up against Jose Urena. Moving ourselves along, we've got Oakland 3.9 implied runs going up against Houston 4.7. I will say Oakland, a fantastic offense, but Framber Valdez been pretty darn impressive this entire season. Going through some of his numbers here, 278 expected WOBA, 313 expected slugging. Gives up some hard hits, but I mean, it was just so weird. I think I brought this up last Tuesday when we did the show together. Negative 6.7 degree average launch angle. I mean, what planet are we on where that's a real thing?
Yeah, that's just insane.
It's absurd. He's just getting slow negative rollers to everybody. I mean, it's unbelievable seeing that launch angle. And then on the other side, Chris Bassitt as well. I mean, updating this player props tool, updating the top pitchers tool here on the top end. I kind of was expecting both of them to be popping up a little bit more than what they are. Chris Bassitt has been a really good pitcher, but 10K, that's a lot to be paying against a Houston team that simply does not strike out. 19% K percentage up against righties on the season. By far the best mark in the big leagues here this year. Not a team that I'm looking to pick on. 10K Chris Bassitt might be tough for me to get to, but tell me if I'm wrong on that. And then Framber Valdez, I definitely have interest in. If I'm going to pivot off of Jacob deGrom, which I probably won't, but if I did, Framber Valdez would probably be it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. He's someone that I doubt I get a lot of exposure to if I go the deGrom route, because I'm going to be living in that like 7 to 8K range with my SP2. If I get away from deGrom, that's going to open up so much salary at pitcher that you'll start getting some Valdez. He does have pretty drastic splits in terms of strikeout numbers against righties and lefties. He hasn't allowed much power to either side, but only a 21.5% strikeout percentage this year against right-handed hitters is a little bit concerning when you're going to get an Oakland lineup that most likely has 8 right-handed hitters plus Matt Olson. So that's another thing where, again, I just don't think Valdez, even though he's a good pitcher, I don't think he's going to jump out as a DFS option for me unless I end up not going to deGrom. Chris Bassitt is another one where, like, I think he's a good pitcher. I don't like the matchup here against Houston, and I think it's going to be really tough to go like deGrom plus Bassitt. So someone that, maybe you roll the dice on a little bit if you don't allocate ownership to deGrom. But assuming I'm going to get a lot of deGrom, I don't think I'll get much Bassitt.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing any desire to really go to bats in this game either. I mean, is this kind of just a write-off spot? I mean, Houston has the ability to hit, and Kyle Tucker, Jordan Alvarez there, 586 X slugging, 545. Maybe it's like another two-man. Maybe they can be today's J-Ram and Franmil Reyes, where I accidentally don't include them here. But Kyle Tucker and Alvarez, I feel like I might get to a little bit of as like a two-man game. But what are you going to be doing with bats in this game? Yeah,
not overly interested in bats here. You can make the argument with Houston that we did with the Dodgers and that we did with the Cubs, just that, they're a very talented offense that isn't likely to get much ownership. Right now, 1% aggregate ownership, 3% top stack percentage on DraftKings. But aside from that argument, there's like nothing that makes me really want to go there. When you look at Chris Bassitt this year, sub 100 ISO allowed to righties, 157 to lefties. Overall, talking about him and Valdez, both guys are between 0.75 and 0.8 home runs per 9 allowed this year. So neither one really giving up power. It's just not a spot where you're looking at it and picking out hitters that look really good. I think if you are going to go here, it's more of the mindset that every pitcher has a couple of bad games every season, and the Astros are fully capable of putting up monster games against anyone. But just, a low probability, high upside spot, I think, for Houston.
Cincinnati, 5.3 implied runs going into the Royals, into Kauffman Stadium here, 4.3 for Kansas City. We've got Luis Castillo. We've got Chris Bassitt. Luis Castillo, talking point of every MLB DFS slate, because we know the kind of upside that exists in that arm. Very, very live arm, but it's not exactly the right price point to be sitting at that you really want to be going his direction day in, day out. I mean, what is his price now here? I just lost him here on DK. 8,500. Yeah, that's not exactly what we were kind of looking for out of him here. For the season, Luis Castillo, 37.5% hard hit percentage is nifty. 373 expected slugging is nifty, but only a 21.5% K percentage. That's just come way, way down on him. Still walking dudes, 9.5% walk rate here. Favorable hitting conditions. I mean, are you looking to take any shots whatsoever on Luis Castillo? I never know. I saw the process there.
I never know what to make of him because, he has good stuff. He's always been a very good strikeout pitcher that gives up power. And then this year, he just comes in, stops giving up power, and stops striking guys out. So I don't think I'll get to a ton. I'm pulling up now to see kind of where we have him projected. Where I have him projected. I have him as a middle of the road pitcher in terms of even value at his salary. He's not one of the top projected pitchers in terms of raw points. He's not one of the top values. So I kind of don't expect to get to a whole lot of him. If I get some, that's fine. I still want to believe in Luis Castillo as a DFS option, and the matchup's not terrible against KC. But I think there's some guys that are $1,000 or so cheaper that I'd be more inclined to go to.
Like a Brokeback Mountain, I can't quit you kind of situation. Not the best reference to probably bring up. Chad is spicy today, but I'm happy to bring up Brokeback. Just fine with it. Life is good. Going to the other side of it, Kansas City, I have no desire to play this interesting individual named Chris Bassitt, who gives up a 5.10 expected slugging, only strikes out dudes in a 19.2% clip, 11.8% walk rate. I mean, this is definitely going to be a Cincinnati side, correct?
Yeah, I love the Reds here again. They kind of came through for me yesterday, not quite as much as I needed them to. But I think the way things look right now, I'll be going right back there. Chris Bassitt is a good pitching prospect. Fangraphs has him as Kansas City's number 4 guy, 104 overall. Came up last year briefly, made 10 starts. Wasn't anything special. And then this year, he has not been very good either. But it's a really tough spot here against Cincinnati, I think, for a left-handed pitcher like Bassitt. 18.3% strikeout percentage against righties. Going to get a right-handed heavy Cincinnati lineup. 229 expected ISO to righties. He also hasn't been very good against lefties, and that's important to note. The strikeout percentage is higher, but he's allowed a 303 expected ISO. That's important because when you talk about the Reds, not only do you have Castellanos, Suarez, Aquino, potentially Jonathan India, from the right side, but you also have Jesse Winker, who's very good from the left side, Joey Votto, who's very good. So this is a spot where I think if you are stacking the Reds, you can go ahead and include those good left-handed hitters because, for one, they can have success against Bassitt, and for two, if your stack's doing well, then you're going to get into the bullpen and you can get some favorable matchups later on. So Castellanos, I really like. Suarez, I think, is a very strong option. But if you're stacking here, definitely, consider Winker and Votto as well.
Yeah, and if you don't get India in that lineup, Alejo Lopez led off yesterday. 360, 437, 485, and 49 games across AA and AAA here. That's pretty good. Only struck out at a 7.9% clip. Also pretty useful. So he makes contact. If you're going to get him at 3,500, he was 2K, I believe, yesterday, right? Wasn't he 2K just yesterday?
Lopez?
Yeah, he's 3,500 now.
He was 3,400 yesterday.
Oh, he's 34. Okay, I can't remember. But anyway, he was 35. He's 35 here. That's still somebody who, if he's going to be leading off, I'm happy to include him in that grouping as well.
Also, if Tyler Stevenson happens to be in the lineup, that's a nice power option you can go to at catcher.
Yeah, that's a useful guy that always kind of seems like somebody where you get him in the 4-hole, 4,100, not too shabby to be going his direction either. As for the Royals, I mean, as much as we've talked about Luis Castillo, I mean, he has a walk problem. He's got a very live arm, but he definitely can give up some contact. I mean, oh God, this KC side, I mean, it's such a low total here, 4.3 implied runs, but I'm still going to stack them up here and call it a day. What are you going to do?
Talking about Kansas City?
Mm-hmm.
not really that interested. Like,
oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just am interested. I would say Luis Castillo isn't as popular as what I would expect him to be on some of these normal slates. Obviously, people have started to catch on that he's not the best pitcher that we're kind of looking to on this slate. 7.2% top 2 percentage here. Not very popular, only 2% ownership. So I guess maybe you're not getting the leverage there by going KC, but I was just looking at the hitting environment. I mean, it's 88 degrees out there, 50% humidity, winds blowing out to left. I don't know. I could make a case for going to some of these power bats, but
yeah, I think I'd be more interested if that Castillo ownership does come up. Kind of like I guess I was saying about the Tigers with Dane Dunning. When Ohtani's ownership presumably gets fixed, maybe you see more going to Castillo, in which case I think you could make that argument. He's done a pretty good job limiting power this year. But $2,900 Jorge Soler, I could see as like a one-off. Ryan O'Hearn at 2,800, Hunter Dozier at 25. These are guys that I think I could make a case for like individually or as mini stacks maybe if I am playing like DeGrom lineups with a more expensive stack, because even though I think Castillo is still pretty good and he's done a good job limiting power, those guys do have a lot of home run upside for their salary.
If you're just joining us here now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are just flying through these games to get this done and wrapped up here before 12:15 out on the East Coast, 9:15 out here on the West Coast. We're going to the White Sox, 4.4 implied runs going up against the Minnesota Twins here, 3.9. That is a scary radar to be looking at here. I just pulled it up, 70 degrees there. I might have to text my parents here. I think they're going up to Minneapolis here for the afternoon. I think they were planning on going to the game. Might not be happening if I had to guess. I know Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where they live at, there was a bunch of storms that came through there, probably making their way over to Minneapolis here at the moment. So that would be probably not ideal. But Carlos Rodon, 10.3K over on DK. Jose Barrios, 8.8K. Both phenomenal pitchers going number 3 and number 4 in our top 2%. Or top 2 pitchers on this slate for DraftKings. I don't know. I just don't really want to be rostering either comparatively to Jacob deGrom. I guess Barrios you compare with deGrom. 8,800 isn't too unreasonable for him, but not my favorite pitcher to always be targeting. I always feel like he's a little bit overowned compared to what his strikeout potential is on any given slate. It's been better this year, 24.7% K percentage, but still not elite. 36.3% for Rodon. Oh my lordy. What are you going to be doing with the pitchers here?
Yeah, I mean, I like both pitchers. You mentioned 3rd and 4th in top 2 percentage on DraftKings. Carlos Rodon getting a lot more ownership right now than Barrios. The thing is, like, in cash, I think it'll be pretty easy to get deGrom, Rodon if you want to. But in tournaments, you're kind of going to I think you're probably going to be like kind of pigeonholing yourself onto certain stacks if you do that. So in tournaments, I'd be more inclined probably to go like deGrom. And again, this comes back to how you're going to end up, what you end up doing with deGrom. But assuming that I end up in the camp where I'm rostering deGrom, I could see myself being under on Carlos Rodon and then being over on some of these cheaper SP2s. But it's not really anything to do with disliking Carlos Rodon. He comes in with a 36% strikeout percentage this year. The matchup's not great against Minnesota, but you do also still have Josh Donaldson and Nelson Cruz banged up. So there's the potential that you're getting this Minnesota lineup without their 2 best right-handed hitters, or 3 if you want to include Byron Buxton, who's still out. So there is the potential for this to actually end up looking like a very, very favorable matchup for Carlos Rodon, where you're replacing Donaldson and Cruz with guys who are not nearly as good as them. So my total interest in him will kind of depend on what Minnesota's lineup looks like. If we assume it's their full strength lineup, I still think Rodon's a good play. If Donaldson and Cruz are out, I think he's even better though. And as far as Barrios goes, he's another one I'll be paying attention to the ownership, because he's priced similarly to Ohtani, who is just like vacuuming up all that ownership right now. If that holds true up until lock, and we only have Barrios projected around 6% ownership, I will be interested at 8,800, mid-20 strikeout percentage for this guy, 10.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. But if he does get more ownership, it's not a spot that I love. The White Sox are an offense that scares me, and Barrios this year has struggled with left-handed power in particular, 255 ISO allowed to lefties. So it's a pretty scary spot when you have Moncada, Goodwin, Sheets in this lineup. You probably will not have Yasmani Grandal, though, which does benefit Barrios.
Yep, that's true. Eaton for sure, probably in there as well. It seems like they've been going to that 4 cheap outfielder mix here of late. But yeah, the Minnesota side, I think it kind of makes sense to maybe take a shot on a couple of the righties. We'll see if Donaldson and Cruz can get in there. That would be a huge plus for them. Get them at super, super low ownership. But that's about it. I would be looking at playing from that side. Anything else you want to add to this game?
Nope.
And Tyler, fantastic job with pulling up radar on the show. My Lord, I didn't know. I I guess we're going to play weatherman on TV here now too. So I'm excited about such things. Going to our next game on the board, we've got Boston 4.6 implied runs up against the Angels. Now we're getting into these late night hammers, 4.4 for the Angels on one side, Nathan Eovaldi on the other, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, yeah, the Shohei Ohtani ownership was just kind of outrageously massive looking up against Boston. I mean, that feels like something that's going to definitely change, because against Boston, this is just kind of a freaky spot for one Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, the amount of talent he has in that arm is ridiculous. He throws that specific mix. It's the splitter, correct, that he has. That's like one of the top 3 pitches in baseball here at this point in time. What are you going to be doing with Shohei here?
He's 45% owned. I'm staying the hell away. But
yeah.
Assuming,
I think that might change slightly.
Yeah. Assuming that comes back down, he's fine. I mean, we know the strikeout stuff is there. The matchup's not very good against Boston. 4.4 implied run total, like just not a spot I feel very good about for Ohtani. Also, the fact that he's coming off of that god-awful outing last time out certainly doesn't make you feel any better. But 8,300, I mean, there is a very high ceiling for him just based on the strikeout stuff. So if his ownership ends up being low, sub 10% or something, I think he's someone that I probably end up getting to at least a little bit in tournaments. But this really isn't a spot that I'm like seeking out Ohtani, because I think the Red Sox offense is dangerous. I think Ohtani does have enough concerns in terms of, pitch count, going deep into games, matchup, whatever the hell happened last time when he walked 4 guys in the first inning and didn't even get out of the inning. There's enough concerns where I'm not actively seeking out Ohtani here. I think there's just enough other SP2s on the slate that I can feel a little bit better about.
He got so squeezed in that game because, again, I do watch baseball, unfortunately, for people who don't think that I do, but I definitely watched every single minute of that game up until the rain delay. But yeah, Shohei Ohtani got completely squeezed. His first batter that he faced, there were definitely 2 missed strikes within that. He ended up walking him. It kind of seemed like it snowballed from there. He had 4 walks in the inning. It just got away from him really, really quickly. Wasn't even giving up that crazy of hard contact in that spot. It seemed like it was just kind of getting singled and doubled to death there. Gave up what, 3 runs, and then he had the reliever come in for him, who then gave up. So he gave up 4, and then the guy ended up letting the entire bases clear on that last at bat of the inning. So that was a brutal beat for sure. Probably the most overexposed I've been to a pitcher this entire season relative to ownership. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but that was a different spot against the Yankees. These Boston Red Sox bats, definitely scary up and down the entire lineup. Rafael Devers from the left side, 55.8% hard hit percentage. JD Martinez, Bobby Dahlbeck even hits for a lot of power, 481 expected slugging there. Generally down a little bit further in the order. Even Hunter Renfroe, righty on righty. He's been in the lineup a little bit more here. I'm expecting it to be Verdugo, but we shall see. Maybe not a ton of interest here, but we know the walk problem that exists. Might this be a spot to go to a low-owned Boston stack?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of echoing what I said about the Cubs, the Dodgers, the Astros. Like, so if Ohtani actually ends up projected for the crazy ownership he's getting right now, then I absolutely love Boston, because you're just stacking a team with a 4.5 implied run total against a guy that half the field has. But assuming that ownership changes and Ohtani doesn't get a lot of ownership, Boston isn't going to like jump out to me as a top option, but they do still have a very high ceiling. They're reasonably priced as well. The middle of the order is expensive with Martinez, Bogarts, and Devers, but the rest is pretty inexpensive. And, Ohtani does struggle with walks a bit. You can potentially get into the Angels bullpen pretty early. So, again, it's just kind of a low probability, high upside spot that isn't going to be my favorite target most likely, but that, I think is a decent spot to go to.
And the Angels, we can't play Shohei Ohtani, so what's the meaning of life today?
Yep, pretty much.
Cool. Yep. I don't really know what to tell you. It's pretty dumb. Colorado, 4.2 implied runs going to Arizona, 4.4 runs on that side, 4.5 here now. We've got John Gray on one side, traditionally a guy that gets brought up a lot in DFS, better ballpark than pitching in Coors, that is for sure. But on the season here for him, only a 20.6% K percentage, a good real life pitcher here at the moment, limiting that hard contact, 35.2%. The guy I actually want to talk about, and it's maybe just a results-based thing, because if you look at his advanced metrics, doesn't look too nifty. 21.4% K percentage, 437 expected slugging, 40.1% hard hit percentage. But in his last couple starts, he has been really, really good, and up to 9,200 facing a team in Colorado where you cannot get a better matchup This Colorado team against right-handed pitching on the season, only a 73 WRC plus. I could see Merrill Kelly kind of being a sneaky option on this slate as somebody to get a little bit different. We've seen some massive DK outings out of him in this last three, 24.2, 23.9, 23.6. Is this a spot where we can take some shots on Merrill Kelly?
I like the ballpark. I like the matchup. I hate the price tag. 9,200, I think, is just pretty tough to get to, even in a good matchup. He's someone that, I guess he kind of falls into that like Valdez Bassitt category, where if I'm not allocating a bunch of ownership to Jacob deGrom, I'm going to have a ton of money that I can use, and Merrill Kelly makes perfect sense. But if I am going to deGrom in a lot of lineups, I don't really want to be spending $9K for Kelly when there's so many pitchers between like $7K and $8,500 that give me the same range of outcomes as Kelly, have ceilings that are just as high, and I can save a little bit of money there. So I think, again, it kind of just depends on deGrom. I will say that looking at the top pitchers tool, he does look like a guy that you would want to get to if you're playing the ownership game and not going to deGrom, because we have Kelly with a 6.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, sub 1% ownership right now. So I think the matchup's good. I think the park is fine. All that's good for Kelly. I just really have a hard time paying $9,200 for a pitcher that has struck out 21% of hitters this year.
Stephen Leibowitz, he just said, did I miss you talking about Eovaldi and the Angels? Eovaldi, limiting hard contact, not a guy that we're going to be rostering by DFS means, but when you can't play Shohei Ohtani in the lineup, it kind of makes it hard to want to justify going in there and stacking up the Angels, correct?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to stack the Angels because, one, I respect Eovaldi, and two, you're just missing the best hitter on the team. As far as Eovaldi goes, don't really like the salary all that much for him. Not a high strikeout guy, more of someone that just, limits damage, decent strikeout stuff. If you were a little bit cheaper, I'd be more interested.
So looking at the Colorado and Arizona game, I don't see any bats here that I really want to go nuts with. I mean, I might play a one-off of Ryan McMahon from the Colorado Rockies so long as he's not in the 7 hole, which I still don't understand what's been happening when he gets randomly put down in the 7 and 6 hole, because he's one of the better hitters on this team. I guess Charlie Blackmon maybe, but oh God, he's just been abysmal as well. 4.9K. It's not like you're getting a discount on him either. I mean, are there any bats that stick out to you in this game?
I'll mention the Diamondbacks just because of their DraftKings pricing. I think it'll change between now and lock, but like in the early lineups I built, they were pretty useful. Like if you're going, especially like in cash, if you're going Carlos Rodon with Jacob deGrom, you get, a really cheap Josh Rojas probably leading off, David Peralta at 2,600. So it's more of just they show up kind of as filler in quote unquote optimal lineups, but that also leads them to be projected to be one of the most over-owned teams. 10% aggregate ownership right now going to Arizona on DraftKings, by far projected to be the top value stack, but only a 2% chance of being the top stack. So a team that I would stay far, far away from in tournaments if that ownership holds.
Absolutely. St. Louis. We've got St. Louis, 3.9 implied runs going to San Francisco Giants. 4.6 here, it looks like on their side. Wind's blowing out, but that ballpark kind of mitigates a little bit of that. 56 degrees, not your most ideal hitting weather by any means. Adam Wainwright on one side of the bunch, Johnny Cueto, 7.7K. We've seen some upside from Adam Wainwright. We've seen Johnny Cueto just kind of be effective. What are your interests in them from a DFS perspective?
I'm very interested in Wainwright at 8,100.
Oh, wow.
Just really like the park. Obviously, the weather is great for pitching. The park's great for pitching. The Giants continue to be just like a kind of annoying, pesky offense, but I also just still have a lot of trouble actually buying into them being good. And Wainwright's been solid this year, which is not something that I would have thought I'd be saying, but 23.5% strikeout percentage against hitters from either side of the plate, 160 ISO to righties, 151 expected ISO to lefties, so not giving up a lot of power. Just, I think, a pretty decent spot for Wainwright against what I think is a kind of, middle of the road Giants offense.
And then Johnny Cueto. I mean, are we going to have any interest in going to him whatsoever? 457 expected slugging, only a 19% K percentage. The price point isn't even like that outrageous to be able to help you out too much on this slate. 7,700, not very useful, right?
Yeah, it's hard for me to get there. Like, I just don't think he has quite as much strikeout upside as Adam Wainwright does. Comes into this start with a 19% strikeout percentage compared to 23.3 for Wainwright. Cueto, 4.15 xFIP is okay. Wainwright 3.67 is better. Similarly priced. The Cardinals offense, to me, like, I think they're a more dangerous offense. There are some strikeouts to be had there. There's certainly a streaky offense, but I'm a little bit more scared by the hitters in the Cardinals lineup than I am the Giants lineup.
0.5% ownership right now. So sign me up for a little bit of them for sure. And your 150 max stuff, no problem getting to the usual suspects of Goldschmidt, Arenado, even put in Tyler O'Neill, 52.7% hard hit percentage. Nice 2 and 3 man stack kind of spot for them. San Francisco, I mean, a couple interests in a couple guys. I mean, Brandon Crawford, 566 expected slugging. He's been pretty revelatory is the word I'm looking for. Buster Posey, always viable at catcher. Anything else that sticks out to you?
3K Alex Dickerson. Just a pretty cheap price tag there for him. Not someone that I would expect to garner a lot of ownership, because you're just going to get, when people go to the cheap bats, they're going to go elsewhere. There's some other guys that project a little bit better, but 175 expected ISO against righties this year for Dickerson. That's just a pretty cheap price point. Yastrzemski, I think is good. He's also 5K, so that's always pretty tough to get to when it's in San Francisco.
And now we go Padres hosting Washington. I don't see a total there at the moment. We don't have anything listed. We do have some probable pitchers, though. On one side, it is Ryan Weathers for the San Diego Padres. On the other side, Jeffrey Rodriguez, who is 4K. He's a reliever. He's not going to be going anywhere, probably not going to be viable. Only 32 and 31 pitches in his last 2 outings here. He's kind of been slowly into the rotation there, but God, I can't really see getting to either pitcher whatsoever here.
Yeah, pretty tough to do, I think. Like there are some slates where I could see making a case for Weathers when, because he's only 6,600, there aren't really cheap pitching options that are viable tonight. But on this case, there's enough like 7 to 8K guys that are, they're more expensive than Weathers, but not by that much. And there's going to be enough cheap hitting that you can get to because of 28 teams playing, that I don't think Weathers will end up being that necessary. On the other side, I certainly can't see it getting to anyone from the Nats bullpen game.
And on the other side for Washington, we got some hitters there. Yesterday, it was pretty crazy to watch how they dug into Musgrove. Got off to a hot start, only ended up winning 7-5. I thought they were going to go for like a dozen runs at that point in time. Josh Bell, Juan Soto, getting Trey Turner back in that lineup. Definitely something that makes a difference when you have a shortstop who has a 47% hard hit percentage, 497 slugging, has a sprint tool, absolutely a 5-tool player. Trey Turner, kind of the whole top end of this lineup. Are you interested in stacking even against a lefty? I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, not too worried about it. The thing that makes it tough is like Alcides Escobar, I had no idea was still in Major League Baseball. Last I had heard he like couldn't make the Orioles last year or 2 years ago. Trey Turner is unbelievably expensive. He's more expensive than Fernando Tatis on the other side of this game. Soto, lefty is fine, but it's not perfect. Josh Bell is relatively expensive. It's kind of just an ugly offense. So I mean, I can see taking some shots, I guess, but we also have them as the third lowest top stack percentage, actually projected to be overowned, probably because they're so cheap. The guys like Escobar, Castro, Gomes are really cheap. So I don't know. I have a hard time getting there and prioritizing them. I think, especially because it's not like Weathers is going to get ownership either.
It's Trey Turner though. 3,900. Yet another reason for you to go over to the FanDuel streets today. Just throwing.
Me thinking Trey Turner was overrated back when he first came up with the Nats and wasn't actually going to end up being really good is one of the worst takes I've probably had in baseball.
I've had some good takes. So Patrick Mahomes, I basically said at Texas Tech when he hung up like a 70 spot on a game I was watching, I'm like, this guy's going to be pretty good. And I made sure I got him in like every single fantasy football league for that year 2, because he sat behind Alex Smith for the first year. That's been my like one good NFL take. Feels like I have like 80 bad ones for every one that I have like that. So Trey Turner, that's nothing. You're just fine.
I was a big Mahomes guy too, but I can't even take credit because I'm just a sucker for arm talent. I was also a big Jamarcus Russell fan, a big Patrick Ramsey fan, so I can't really take credit for Mahomes.
I was upset with the Dalvin Cook pick for the Vikings. So there's things like that. And Christian Ponder, but I hated Christian Ponder. So, I mean, again, you get some good ones, you get some bad ones. That's kind of part of being a fan, also part of just kind of being in this industry. But Trey Turner is pretty good at baseball. I'm sorry, you are wrong. Going to San Diego, we kind of know exactly what we're going to be doing here as well. For Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, getting Eric Hosmer back into the mix here would be good too. Another guy who hits the ball very, very hard, putting it there with Tommy Pham. I got to say, Victor Caratini is a guy that I haven't been playing as much as I probably should, looking at some of his numbers. Only a 372 expected slugging, but a 46.2% hard hit percentage. Somebody that, he's going to K quite a bit here, but actually gets walked at a pretty good rate too, 11.7% walk rate. I think you could do worse than full stacking San Diego, having him as your catcher and calling it a day.
Yeah, I think that's fine. He's cheap. The Padres certainly a team with plenty of upside. Don't love going up against bullpen games, but it's also not a particularly imposing spot here with the Nats. So, I like the Padres. Not one of my favorite stacks. There's still other teams that I feel better about, but not getting a ton of ownership right now. And then obviously a lot of very, very good hitters in this lineup.
I just love chat today. This is fantastic. Loco, you're the man. Everybody's just kind of making me laugh today. It's a good time to be up here talking some MLB, trying to help out the people, putting in the work. But I'm just hanging out and having a good time. So hopefully you are too. Hopefully you can learn a couple things here or there. And if you're here to just kind of be a troll, have fun trolling, but you're probably not going to get to hang out for very long. So enjoy wasting your time. Yankees, let's finish this puppy out. Having a good time. 7.2K, Jameson Taillon, Justice Sheffield, 6.8K. Kind of nice price points on both of these guys. 5.4 implied runs for the Yankees, 4.2 for the Mariners. I mean, Justice Sheffield, just not a very good pitcher whatsoever. Jameson Taillon, this is a good matchup. Also not the most intriguing spot ever, but just for tournament's sake, can you make a case for either one of them at their price points?
I think you can make a case for Taillon at 7,200. The Mariners just not a very good offense. Taillon, decent pitcher, 24% strikeout percentage. He struggled with home runs this year, 1.8 home runs per 9, 4.5 xFIP, not great. But just in terms from like a fantasy standpoint, I think you are getting some upside for that salary at 7,200. And the Mariners are a team that, they have some power, but they also will strike out. So Taillon, someone I could see using as an SP2 down in that, same price range as like Dane Dunning, who I also think I'll be using a lot.
Yeah, I think Dane Dunning is going to be an unfortunately large part of my portfolio today. I think that's probably the only right way to put that. Let's just talk bats then here, because I think Justice Sheffield will kind of gloss over John Carlos Stanton, 59% hard hit percentage. Aaron Judge, you don't need anybody to tell you to be playing either one of them. They were a team that I'm also going to be very, very interested in. We're actually getting some positive leverage on them. Sure, the ballpark is not great, but neither is Justice Sheffield. And we know how unbelievable these righties are up and down this Yankees lineup. I mean, this is just a full stack and go, right?
Yeah, one of the best stacks on the slate, I think. Talked about Joey Gallo maybe being the best home run play. If he's the best, Stanton and Judge aren't far behind him. Another pitcher here in Sheffield that just doesn't miss bats, 17.5% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters. Aaron Judge, since the start of the 2019 season, has a 362 expected ISO against lefties. Stanton, 211. Gary Sanchez, 263. LeMahieu, just shy of 200. Luke Voigt, 263. Gleyber Torres, 231. Urshela, 202. I mean, just play everyone from this team. And right now, I mean, you mentioned it, but the top stack tool right now, the three teams with the top three top stack percentages are all projected to be under-owned right now because of so much ownership going to Philadelphia, so much ownership going to cheap teams to help, people get the Grom plus Rodon and whoever. Toronto, Cincinnati, the Yankees, the top three teams in terms of top stack percentage right now, and all three offering positive leverage at the moment. Absolutely love the Yankees bats, whether it's full stacks, mini stacks, one-offs, don't really care. Just load up on these guys against Sheffield.
So is it something, I guess this is the strategy show, so I'll ask you this on the way out here, because I don't have a ton of Mariners interest outside of, the usual Haniger, the little JP Crawford. Anything you want to touch base on the Mariners before I ask you?
Not really. Most of Taillon's issues have been with left-handed power this year. He's allowed a 274 expected ISO to lefties. So, Haniger obviously is good, but from the right side, typically you're going to want to look to the left-handed guys when you're targeting Taillon. So I think Kyle Seager is probably the one that stands out the most for me.
All right, good call.
Oh, also Jake Bauers is 2,100. That's a pretty good tournament play.
Yeah, that's a good number. That's a good number on him. Enough pop in the bat here on the season. Jake Bauers, only a 385 expected slugging, but 41.8% hard hit percentage, 16.5 degree launch angle. Do not mind it whatsoever. What I was going to ask on the way out here is how do you kind of, if you're somebody who, I think the process that's kind of worked for me over the course of the last couple of years has had a cash lineup, have a GPP lineup, but my cash lineup is probably going to consist of a lot of players that are not going to be big parts of my tournament portfolio because they're all going to be a lot of Phillies or some of the other bats that kind of fit in there. How do you basically manage your bankroll in that kind of a spot where how much would you be allocating for cash? How much would you be allocating for tournaments? Is there something like a quick and fast rule you can have for the people on the way out where it's like, maybe this can help you have exposure to the Phillies, but also not feel like you're kind of basically building two different types of lineups?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bad at the bankroll thing. I kind of just play whatever I want, but normally lately I've just been playing cash. I played tournaments more recently because DraftKings made me an offer on rakeback and stuff for like a week on tournaments. So I was playing more, and now I'm kind of hooked again. But normally I kind of just focus on one or the other. For a very long time, I was solely a tournament player. Now I've been playing just a lot more cash. But when I do play both, it typically ends up, ideally I end up with like a 60-40 or 65-35 split, something like that, in favor of cash. And like you were saying, where my lineups in baseball end up looking drastically different, I do typically like when that happens, because it makes it a lot less likely that I'm just getting shut out across everything. Because of course, if you are playing tournaments and cash, you're getting more actual dollars in play, most likely. And so it is nice to be able, when your lineups end up hedging like that. So it's not something I go out of my way to do, but it does typically happen just because the guys that I'm playing in cash are typically going to be the highest owned guys in tournaments that I'm going to be getting away from. So it works out that way. But yeah, ideally I end up with like a 60-40, 65-35 split, something like that.
Love it. Well, thanks for all your help. Thanks for breaking everything down with us this morning. 14 gamer in the books. This was fun. If nothing else, this was a lot of fun and a lot of entertainment. Hopefully everybody has a fantastic rest of their day. Coming up tonight, we got in the MLB streets. Eitan and Adam are going to be back here for the deeper dive, and I'm going to be on Live Before Lock coming up right after that. That's at 5 p.m. Eastern time that stream is going to start. 5 p.m. and then 6 p.m. Eastern time for the Live Before Lock. And then NBA Live Before Lock, Lofty and Josh coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern time up until the 9 o'clock tip, leading you to game one of the Suns and the Bucks. Do you have a pick for that one on the way out?
Suns with Giannis doubtful.
Let's go. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. He's Adam. I'm Eric. Have a great day.